that the client is not able to tell. You know, there's still the secure lock icon up here in the address bar.
The input looks normal to the client.
Oh. So we immediately understood the significance of this. SSL is a critical data security protocol for the whole internet. It was badly broken. I hadn't ever had the occasion to start a blog before. I decided this was a good enough reason, but I didn't want to drop a 0 day, so I typed up a summary of, a concise summary of what the flaw was, made a SHA-1 hash of it, and posted that as an initial post. Soon afterwards, John Callis told us about the Nostradamus attack and how that was kind of a dumb thing to do. But there are 3 basic attacks to this TLS. There's the case where a client certificate is required, and that can trigger renegotiation from the web server. There's a case where the web server might be configured to allow different cipher suites based on different directories. That's probably not a real common case. And then there's the case of a client-initiated renegotiation that we initially kind of discounted that why would that ever be enabled on a web server anyway? And then there's another attack where the web browser, which is providing client certificate credentials, those credentials are able to be taken by a man in the middle and then and transported to any other web server on the internet that will accept those client credentials and be used to validate the man in the middle's evil request. So, we were wondering about what is really the scope or the impact of this? And, the client certificate, that's not used by most websites, but it is used by very important websites who have special needs for security. The Cipher Suite upgrade attack was cute, but it really amounts to reason number 1001 to disable HT access files in a shared hosting web service. And the client-initiated attack, we weren't even sure that it would work.
Back up 1 second. One of the reasons we weren't sure that it would work is we actually initially tested that against Microsoft IIS and found that, in fact, if you try to send an unsolicited client hello, it resets the TCP connection with prejudice, and that's that. So we kind of assumed that was the end of it, and nobody used it. So, is renegotiation worth saving? If 95% of sites can live without it, why didn't everybody just patch to disable renegotiation and then everybody will be secure again? It's not like application developers even knew that it existed, in the most part anyway. But there's an interesting parallel with this thing called IP source routing, if everybody's heard of it. Presumably that was once useful to somebody for something, but as it stands now, I think network administrators, if they don't know much, they know that IP source routing is something that you should block at the firewall, and so it's in practice not usable for serious stuff. But one thing that requires renegotiation is Tor. Tor uses renegotiation in order to refresh the crypto keys because it keeps up long-running TCP connections and TLS connections and transfers large amounts of data over them. It also tries to hide the credentials. So
yeah, it uses client certs, and renegotiating is a way to pass the client cert not in plain text, but protected from at least a passive eavesdropper. Another thing that uses TLS renegotiation is web services. Microsoft's invested a lot in this web services framework architecture, and client certificates are really the recommended best practice for providing for client authentication in this model. It's way better than putting a plain text password in a text file somewhere that the thing reads on startup. And so our entire goal at this point was really to make sure that Microsoft's business model was protected. What does it take to get some shmoo balls up here? Jeez, God. Sorry. And then, other things that are protected with client certs are America's only strategic UFO base at Area 51. and the canisters of alien bodies that they keep in waste storage containers buried deep underground, as well as other scary objects.
See, at this point, Marsh had been awake a very long time. And we were starting to speculate wildly, and we thought, but the reality is, obviously, the Department of Defense wouldn't get stuck in something like this, right?
So the DoD CAC, Common Access Card System, has 3.5 million active cards, 1 million active card readers, and it operates primarily based on client certificates. The system is used to access secure websites all across the military, and possibly other uses as well. Anything that could talk TLS is potentially pulling client certificates off of this smart card. Here's an example, just a quick search and clicking around on the web. I mean, this was no deep hacking. This is just clicking around on the web. Here's the U.S. Department of Defense military health system as an example of this mixed model client authentication environment. It's inviting you to log in with the common access card, and it didn't ask for a client certificate when I pulled up the page initially. So it's got to be doing a renegotiation under the hood, and that's got to be vulnerable. And the real issue here is that in this database behind this web front end, are the personally identifying information of everybody who's ever taken a bullet or shrapnel for to defend this city. And I think that's probably worth trying to protect. These people who are vulnerable right now, and it's not like their administrators did anything wrong to configure this site. That's not the only site. There are other publicly accessible URLs that require a client certificate. I mean, in this example, it shows that it's Microsoft IIS serving this, and IIS has the helpful behavior of doing a renegotiation anytime a client certificate is involved.
In other words, it can't possibly be configured, documentation notwithstanding, it can't possibly be configured not to renegotiate.
These people have to have a patch. Maybe we could hope that these systems all fall under physical security, that the CAC card is only accepted for websites on, say, a base where the IS department strictly controls access. Well, here's an example of a project where they're inviting you to download a CD-ROM and boot from it to give the system some clean image and not save anything to the hard drive. That then, if you could read this text, it says it turns an untrusted system, such as your home computer, into a trusted network client, and plug in your USB reader to access CAC-protected DoD websites. Now, we should also tell these people that they should probably protect the ISO download with HTTPS as well.
All right. So we had a lot of interesting conversations about this and realized over a period of time that this was going to need a coordinated effort to fix. Actually, that's not entirely true. Marsh, I think, realized it was going to need a coordinated effort in about 5 seconds of inspiration, and it took a couple days to talk me into it. But
so it's a protocol level problem, and the only way to fix it is to patch all the web servers and all of the clients in the world. So we weren't ambitious about it at all, but
exactly. So the deal here, of course, then is because of all the people that would have to be involved, this thing was virtually guaranteed to leak out at some point. On the flip side, we wanted to engineer a disclosure where there was a near simultaneous disclosure to all the affected parties for a bunch of reasons. One of them is that there's an interesting sort of tension between some of the vendors that are affected here. Like, for example, Apache and IIS are fighting for market share, and one's the most popular web server on the internet, and the other's got more business pages. I don't know. Anyway, you can imagine an open source project shipping a fix and then saying, hey, this is why you should be using open source.
We expected the open source projects would all have a patch within hours and leap the vendors by months.
Exactly.
We expected that.
So at any rate, and then there's some other really interesting things. Like, for example, IBM is heavily dependent on Java. So they're shipping components from Sun and from the Apache project, which then are in turn dependent on other open source projects. IBM is directly dependent on OpenSSL, so you can't just kind of disclosed to disclosed